In a world that's just overflowing with data, being able to turn all that raw information into clear, actionable insights, well, that's not just a skill anymore. It's a superpower. So let's dive in and see how it's actually done. So here's what we're going to cover. We'll kick things off with the big problem of data overload. Then we'll walk through the 5 key areas of the analysis process. And we'll wrap up by looking at the incredible power you get from a really good insight. And this really gets to the heart of it. The main goal here isn't just about crunching numbers. It's about finding that hidden value, that gold inside your data, and then telling a story with it. A story that helps people make real, meaningful decisions.
All right, so let's start with a challenge that I bet feels pretty familiar to a lot of you. Businesses today are practically drowning in data. It's coming from everywhere, it's messy, it's disconnected, it's just plain overwhelming. So the very first step is turning all of that chaos into some kind of clarity.
And you've got to know, the stakes here are really, really high. Because if you start with bad data, you're going to end up with bad conclusions. It's that classic garbage in, garbage out problem. This can cause people to totally lose trust in your reports. And even worse, it can lead to some seriously negative impacts on the business. Getting this right from the very beginning is absolutely crucial.
So how do we start to fix this? Well, it all begins with step 1, preparing the data. This is where we start to bring some order to all that chaos. And I'm not going to lie, this is often the most time-consuming part of the entire process, but it is so, so vital.
I just love this analogy. You're not just organizing your data, you're basically sculpting it. You start with this big, messy, unrefined block of raw information, and you just carefully chip away at it, clean it up, and shape it until you have something that's actually beautiful and ready for analysis. And this slide right here shows that process in action perfectly. You look at the left in the before state, and you see these messy, inconsistent entries. They're all supposed to be the same thing, but they're all just a little bit different. But after you run them through a cleaning process, you get what you see on the right. Totally uniform, standardized, and ready to use data. It's all about making those raw bits and pieces reliable. And that little bit of cleaning is just one piece of the puzzle. The whole prep phase has a checklist of things you gotta do, making sure numbers are numbers and dates are dates, figuring out what to do with missing values, getting rid of any duplicates, and, of course, renaming columns so they actually make sense to a human being. Okay, so once our data is all clean and orderly, we get to build on that solid foundation. That brings us to step 2, modeling the data. This is where we start making connections and building the structure that's going to support our whole analysis.
Now, the heart of this step is creating what's called a semantic model. You can think of this as the single source of truth for your report. It's where you bring all your data together into one unified place, even if it originally came from 10 different sources like Excel files or databases. This model becomes the foundation for everything else you're going to build.
Within that model, we can add our own calculations, and there are 2 main ways to do it. On the left, you have calculated columns. Think of these like pre-calculating an answer for every single row and just storing it there. It's static. But on the right, you have measures, which are way more dynamic. They only calculate an answer on the fly, right when you ask a question like, hey, what were our total sales? This makes them super flexible and really powerful for your reports. All right, now for the really fun part. Step 3 is all about visualization. This is where we take our clean, modeled data and we stop looking at boring rows and columns and start turning it into a visual story that people can actually understand at a glance. So how do you actually do that? How do you bring the data to life and pick the right visual to tell the right story? Well, the key is all about matching the type of visual to the question that you're trying to answer. For instance, if you're trying to compare values across different categories, let's say sales for each of your products, the bar chart is your absolute best friend. It's a classic for a reason. It's simple, it's clear, and it's incredibly good at showing you who's on top. But what if you want to show proportions? Like how much each part contributes to the total? Maybe market share for each region. That is where a donut chart just shines. It gives you that instant, intuitive feel for how the pieces make up the whole. And then sometimes you just need to shout one really important number from the rooftops, your main KPI, that key performance indicator. A single number card does exactly that. It puts that metric front and center so it's impossible to miss. It's perfect for dashboards where you just need a quick health check on the business. Okay, so we've got these awesome, powerful visuals. Now what? Well, now we move into the final stages, which are all about taking what we see and turning it into action. Steps 4 and 5 are analyzing what we've built and then managing those insights. See, analysis is so much more than just describing what's on the chart. This is the human part of the process. This is where you put on your detective hat and you start asking why. Why did sales take a dip last quarter? What does this trend tell us about next year? This is where raw data really becomes business intelligence. And finally, let's be honest, an insight is completely useless if it just stays on your computer. The manage phase is all about getting your findings into the right hands. That means sharing your reports, working with your team on what you found, and of course, making sure all this information is secure and only being seen by the people who were supposed to see it. So, let's bring this all home and look at the final destination. Why do we go through this whole process in the first place? It's all about the true power of insight. And this isn't just some abstract theory. Check this out. After putting a real data analysis process in place, a company called EduClass saw an 18% increase in their global sales in the first year alone. That is the kind of tangible bottom line impact we're talking about. And it just all comes back to this one idea. The end product you're creating isn't just a dashboard full of pretty charts. It's a narrative. It's a clear, persuasive story that guides your leaders and gives them the confidence to make the right call. So I'll leave you with this one final thought. Every single piece of data in your organization has a story that it's trying to tell you. A story about your customers, your products, your operations. The only question left is, are you ready to listen?